everyone. My name is Lindsay, and this is Curator Chat, where we talk about a little bit more topical museum subjects. Sometimes we might answer questions from you if you have any, and we also take suggestions for different museum topics. So if you have any suggestions, please feel free to comment or send us a message or leave something on Facebook to let us know what you're interested in us answering or in any topics we might talk about. I'm here with the other two curators at the Museum Center at 5 Points, Elijah and Hope. Today our topic is working at a museum. So the first question I'm going to pose is, what do you do?
Well, I am technically the curator of education, which means I deal with like the educational aspects of things, field trips, trunk shows, going into classrooms, but then also public programming, so things like history happy hours and some volunteer management as well. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, so I am the assistant curator of education. So basically what Hope does, but I assist her in that mission. So I have been doing a lot of the trunk shows and helping out a lot with the field trips. I've primarily been like the one like going out to those trunk shows at schools. But Hope comes a lot too. And so we've sort of partnered in meeting with the schools out there. And then also we've been at nursing homes and assisted living facilities, places like those as well. And then we also, like Hope was saying, about history happy hour and public programming like that. So lots of things.
And I'm Lindsay. I'm the curator of collections. That means I kind of handle the artifacts, and the exhibits are my primary functions, but not my only functions. I do a lot of the graphic design. I do a lot of little things. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. So
and let's not forget we podcast.
We do have a podcast. We have a podcast. I also do the museum blog. We do a lot of stuff. Right now I'm taking care of the virtual museum. Because it's kind of an exhibit on its own. So it's like handling another kind of exhibit. So I'm kind of heading that up. What is your favorite part of your job?
This.
Yeah, I do everything. But I think that's also the nature of a small museum too. Everybody's kind of like helping out everybody else.
Yeah, everybody has to pitch in.
Yeah, because like for big events, we all help set up.
I guess to answer your question though that I interrupted, my favorite part of my job is like I just really like the history of everything. So I like to be able to talk about history. I like to be able to like find out more. I probably like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff more than like being right out in the front. I like to do the research. I like to find out like more and more and more, even if it's not always like something that you want to tell everyone, or that you can really like share publicly, because history can be just as inappropriate as everything else, but I really like that aspect of it. And I also I really like some of the big public events. I think those are fun and a little bit different. But my favorite part's probably behind the scenes.
I mean, obviously, the most of the exposure that I have to like working in a museum comes from our trunks and like doing those presentations and that sort of thing. And so I would say that that's my favorite part, just because I do enjoy like being in a classroom and sort of getting those interactions with kids and getting to sort of explain history that they have been reading in a book or hearing their teacher talk about, and trying to get them to hold a piece of history in their hands. And just seeing the way that they react and the way that they get excited about even the presentation happening is really encouraging to me. And it's pretty fun to like come in and bring in that aspect of history. And like Hope said, I mean, those bigger events are also like super fun. Like the history happy hours, I haven't been at the museum a ton, but like the last ones that we've done while I've been here have been really, really cool. So definitely the trunk shows have been really great. But then History Happy Hour is also very good.
Yeah, I have two favorite parts. One of them is like when I design an exhibit and it finally like comes together, like the end product of creating an exhibit is always like, because the first parts are always designing it, and then when you actually get to come together and you get to take all the artifacts out and place them out, and I really enjoy that end aspect of it and seeing it all come together and like all come to fruition. The other thing that I really enjoy is touching the artifacts, because when you're like a visitor at a museum, it's always don't touch the artifacts. You can't touch anything. Don't touch. So one of the privileges of being museum curator is to be able to touch the artifacts.
True. Very true.
I'm going to remember this next time you frown at me for touching stuff. This is going to be what I like play back to you.
No. See, and I'll tell you what I always tell you. Do as the curator says, not as she does. So are there either misconceptions that people have about working at a museum, or are there things that people don't know about working at a museum?
I don't know if people really understand like what all goes into it, because I know like before you work somewhere, you don't really think about it. We do so much research. Like we can spend days doing research. Like we personally, and I mean, if you do the Smithsonian or something, it's probably a lot different. But like, especially in a small museum, like we personally set up, if like there's an event, like we personally set up 200 chairs in a room, like there's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes into putting things up, or like just how long it takes to put up an exhibit. Like when you were like sticking like one leaf at a time on the walls for days, I just don't really think that like people know like just how much work actually goes into like making an exhibit or making a presentation or making like even a very small event happen. Sometimes it's a lot. Like we took, for the last History Happy Hour that we did like live, we set up for like 3 days.
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah, we have less than 10 people on staff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and some of them can't help all the time. Like some people, there has to be someone in the front. There has to be like someone in the gallery. Like, so, and like some people are always in meetings. So there's like 5 of us maybe that are free all the time to like, well, not even free all the time, but that are able to put things like that burner to like set up for something or like go around town and like do something.
Yeah.
Like the optimal, like the most we ever get at a time to help set up is about 5. You're right.
Yeah. And I feel like there is a lot of work that goes into those events and things that like it's easy as like the person coming to the museum, like a visitor, to come in and say like wow, like this exhibit's great or whatever, but then to like sort of, I guess, almost expect that it just like got thrown together and just like all sort of happens, and I think it's easy from like I said, like a visitor to come in and be like, yeah, like this is like, to expect that something like the safari exhibit that you threw together, Lindsay, like that was just like, it just happened. And like that you could have one exhibit up one day and then the next day it's like, wow, look at this beautiful exhibit. And it's like, no, that is not how it works. Like it is tedious work. And so I think there are a lot of things that people probably misunderstand about it, especially for a small museum. Because that's where our perspective's coming from. We don't know. I don't know what the Smithsonian is like, so not exactly.
Yeah, the safari exhibit took weeks to physically set up. Prior to that, it took months to research and design. So, I mean, that was no small feat. Like, I was working on that every day for months. And I also basically got a degree in zoology while I was doing it. And that's what I think the biggest misconception that comes to me is that, we're like a big museum and we have an expert in everything. And it's like, there's less than 10 of us. 3 of us are curators, but they kind of come and they, like, people will come in and expect that we have somebody who could speak Chinese and authenticate their Chinese vase. You know, it's, you know, I have to know how to design exhibits. I have to know how to take care of all of these artifacts, but I also have to know history of, like, everything. You know, I had to learn zoology to do the safari exhibit because that wasn't something we normally do. And I'm constantly doing that. It's, you know, I had to learn the history of the Civil War. I had to learn, you know, it's just, I have to know everything. We've had art exhibits before, so I have to know how to take care of art, but I also need to know the subject of art. So a lot of people seem to have that expectation that we are experts in everything, or we have somebody who is an expert in it, no matter what they're asking. But there's just the three of us who are qualified to speak on history. And, you know, while we do have our own, like, areas of expertise, the three of us can't cover everything. And like I said, my job entails a lot of other things too that I have to have knowledge of. I have to have knowledge of graphic design and all these graphic designing programs. I have to have knowledge of, you know, caring for artifacts, emergency procedures for artifacts, what temperature and humidity level artifacts should be stored in. So, you know, I already have a lot of information in my head, and then somebody comes in and wants me to read the Chinese on this vase that they have and authenticate it. I'm like, my Chinese isn't that good.
And that's a real circumstance. So that's like actually something that happens.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also interesting that we all grew up in a different place. So, like, we learned different, like, important facts about different things. So, like, coming here and trying to learn everything that you can about, like, the Yokota region or about Bradley County or anything else, it's almost like starting over. Because, I mean, in Louisiana, you learn a lot of things about Tennessee. Like, you know, I think probably, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that, like, a lot of times the history that you learn is, like, regionally focused. So I didn't learn anything. So when I came here, I was like, I have to learn everything I can about Tennessee because I didn't know. You know, it's not like we have that, like, huge connection to where, like, our families know a lot about this place. I think that's difficult for sometimes because we're kind of outsiders in a way.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of, like, professional knowledge about what my job entails, but the local history knowledge it's been a learning curve that I've really had to kind of delve into. So one last question, and this might be more interesting to people who are interested in working in the museum field. What kind of led you into your position now? What'd you get your degree in? Maybe where did you start with your interest, and kind of how did you get led into this job?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, so I got a bachelor's degree in history from Centenary College of Louisiana, which is, like, a small private school in Louisiana. And I had a professor that kind of read my interests really well, and was like, public history is, like, going to be something that you're going to want to look into and everything. I did a couple of internships at museums and everything, and then I took a break and I just, like, worked and I saved money, and then I went to University of Glasgow in Scotland, and I got a master's degree in museum, and I did some internships there, and then I came back and I applied for, hundreds of jobs, and I ended up not really getting anywhere. So I took a job as an AmeriCorps, which no shade, but I don't suggest that as a career option for anyone. So maybe rethink that if you're going to follow what I'm saying, like, don't do that. But I was in AmeriCorps Vista, and I was working at the museum, and then a full-time position opened up, and I was able to, like, I already had a foot in the door, so I was able, you know, to take on that position. But I always liked history. I'd always liked museums, so it kind of felt like it, when my professor told me that, it felt like a really good fit for me. And I'm actually glad that I had someone that was able to point me in that direction really well. because when I got a degree in history, I was kind of like, I don't know, I could do, because that's kind of a sort of broad, but I got lucky, and then I got, that someone had an idea that of something they thought would fit me, and then I wanted to study overseas, so that's why I did. And as a job that I wasn't sure that I wanted, and now I have a job that I do want. It was all kind of a pretty
Nice. For me, it was less of a path than that. It was I went to Lee University, so I grew up in the Columbus, Ohio region, and I came down to go to Lee in Cleveland. And so then I ended up studying anthropology, got my undergrad in anthropology, and I at the time wanted to pursue a master's in anthropology and go on and like do a bunch of different things. But then I decided to take a gap year, moved back to Ohio, remained in like contact with a couple of my professors, and in a similar way, they had like a pretty heavy impact on me, wanting to like remain at least somewhat in the field of anthropology and trying to use that degree in any way, because at the time I was working at a bar and working at a coffee shop and was just like making the money that way. And so I wanted to do something within the field of anthropology. And then I actually got an email one day from one of my like mentors that I had sort of sought at Lee, and he wasn't a professor of mine, but he is now we actually work pretty closely with him. His name's Will Cam, but he's awesome, really cool guy. Does a lot for our education department at the museum, but he talked with me about it via email and said, hey, I think you might be interested in this like position. And at the time I was like planning on moving back down to Tennessee with my wife, and so it was like kind of crazy. But during my time at Lee, I actually had interned, Lindsay, I believe for you, and actually
Yes.
it eventually became like the whole museum, because Jan asked me like, do you want a job, because we need someone to help. And I said, sure, I need some extra money. And so I had sort of a foot in the door there as well. But once this email came to me, I was moving back to the area, moving to Chattanooga, and thought like, yeah, this sounds like a great opportunity, and got plugged in. And so, yeah, I've been here since like July of last year, and it's been good. But definitely think that the foot in said door is important. Like Hope was saying that she had a foot in the door because of AmeriCorps, foot in the door, and then Hope walks in, foot in the door, Elijah walks in, cue Lindsay.
So I first started school for art in Tokyo, Japan, decided I didn't want to do that. Then I went to college for archaeology, big leap there, at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I kind of made that leap because I liked art, I liked geology, I liked history, and I thought those kind of combined all of those things. I liked languages, and I thought archaeology kind of encompassed all of those really well. So I transferred to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I got a degree in archaeology. I didn't really have like a mentor relationship with anybody there. I did have one language professor who was pretty great, but it was also not really my field. I ended up actually illustrating a textbook that never got the funding to get off the ground for him, but that was cool. Then I did some field work in Peru. While I was in school, I also did some field work in like Virginia and North Carolina. I went straight to grad school in Canada at Trent University, and my thesis was on the collapse of capital cities in Southeast Asia. So I did some field work in Southeast Asia, and eventually finished that up. And when I got back, kind of like Hope, I applied for hundreds of jobs. I didn't get a single bite. So my solution instead of AmeriCorps Vista was to go teach English in Japan. I also wouldn't suggest that, at least not for the company I worked for. So I went and I taught English in Japan, came back and decided that that I was like worn out of traveling. And so I wanted something more stationary, I guess. So I figured a museum was a perfect place, and I started volunteering at the Museum Center at 5 Points. And I was probably there for about, 10 months. When one day I got a phone call from the previous curator of collections, and she's like, I know you're looking for a job. Are you interested in this one? I was like, yeah, I've been sending hundreds of job applications in for like 3 years, and I haven't gotten a single bite. So yes. And so I kind of had my foot in the door too, because I had volunteered under, and I was essentially her assistant at that point. Like, just, it was a volunteer basis, but I did lots and lots of stuff that any regular curator does. So then I got hired on, and I've been here since 2017. So quite the journey for all of us. All right, everyone, thank you for joining us for this curator chat. Once again, if you have any suggestions for topics or questions you'd like us to answer, leave us a comment or send us a message and let us know what you're interested in hearing about. So it's been a great time, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.